Hello and welcome to the official podcast of Palate Exposure, featuring Ilona Thompson, a podcast for those seeking the ultimate in wine, food, and travel. Each week she interviews winemakers, chefs, celebrities, and a variety of guests that shape the way we enjoy life.
Hi, Ilona Thompson here with Palate Exposure, and I'm beaming from ear to ear. I don't know if you can hear it in my voice because I am with one of my favorite people on planet Earth, not just in the winemaking world, Daniel Daou.
Thank you, Ilona.
He's a giant in thought and deed. And I'm here, it's in the middle of production, the middle of harvest, really exciting time, like goosebumps exciting. And I have a million questions, but we'll start with the most relevant here and present. You know, California has been experiencing horrible fire season. And I know a lot of you are wondering what it does to the harvest, to the crop this year, what's happening, and he's the person to ask those questions.
Well, thank you, Ilona. So yeah, you're right. I mean, California has seen, especially Northern California, has seen, I believe, 3 vintages of the last 4 dealing with fires, and also 1 year of earthquakes. So I feel bad for our northern neighbors who have had to endure a lot of these tribulations and trials. Here, we've been very fortunate. Besides 2016, when we had a little bit of fires close to us, so far we've managed, knock on wood, to dodge the bullet. This year was a challenging one, not as much for the fires because the fires stayed away from us. Mm-hmm. There were a couple small fires that were basically taken care of within a couple days. We did get a little bit of haze and smoke, very little from the Carmel Valley fire, from the Big Sur fire, mm-hmm. and obviously, that created a little bit of a haze. But it was, when ash travels more than 24 hours, it doesn't typically create a problem for smoke taint. That's at least, you can't say 100% it won't, but most of the time it does not. There was only 1 day of very fine ash. Clearly, it did not stick around. We've conducted tests throughout the entire vineyard. 0 smoke taint, 0 smoke problems. We're doing even more testings in the wines after they're fermented, but we are very optimistic that we have not had any damage from the fire so far.
That is so great to hear. So your harvest is going on as usual, right? Is it earlier this year? Is there any modifications?
It's a little bit earlier this year. We had, it's a little bit of a drought year. Mm-hmm. So to give you an example, this year we got about 16 inches of rain, which is on the low side for us. Mm-hmm. Last year was close to 40 inches of rain.
Wow.
So a huge drastic difference between the previous year and this year. Probably the biggest challenge for this year was the heat waves. To give maybe, if I can refresh your memory, but in 2017, a severe heat wave hit California. Actually, not just California, but the entire west coast of the United States. The Fisherman's Wharf, which is known for being very cold in the summer, reached 106 degrees in 2017. Most vineyards received severe damage out of the heat waves, and in our case, because we dry farm, when we weren't ready to deal with such an interesting heat wave that was very drastic, we lost 25% of our crop in 2017. So I set out on a mission to try to make sure that this never happens again. So the last 3 years, I've created a special protocol that I've used in the vineyard to help us basically dodge any bullets of heat spikes, which are very likely to continue happening in the future. And the good news is the protocol worked. There was 0 damage in the entire 2 heat waves that hit us. Both of them, each one of them that hit us this year was actually longer and hotter than 2017. And yet we got 0 damage. I'll be glad to tell you how I did that. I don't mind sharing that information. It's a 3-pronged approach that I took to dealing with those heat spikes. The first one is we use a special product called shade cloth. It's a shade cloth that goes on the side of the grapes, and it basically blocks 40% or so of the UV rays. Okay? So we do that every year regardless. But what I noticed in 2017 is some blocks are not quite positioned, southern exposure. So what would happen is that the sun would get them on the other side where the shade cloth was not, and we would lose. That's why really we got hurt quite a bit. So this year, as soon as the heat wave, we saw that it was coming, we put double shade cloth on basically every block that was, an iffy block in terms of will it make it, in terms of raisening and puckering and dehydration, etc. So that's one prong. The second prong, and probably the most important one, is there's a new product that we started using, and we actually did the trial with the company that brought it from Italy. Inardis is the company, And the product's called Blue Vitae. And what it does is it's aimed at really activating the soil microorganism in the ground that leads to a much healthier vine, much stronger vines, thicker cane, more green canopy. It's like almost taking a multivitamin, but it's not really a fertilizer. It actually relies on the vine using its own soil microorganism to really strengthen the vines. And the idea is very simple. If you take a person that's very, very well fit, and they really work out a lot, and they're in great shape, and you stick them in the Mojave Desert, right, at 140 degrees or whatever hot it gets there, chances are they're going to last longer than the person who is out of shape, frail, has some underlying conditions, right? They're not going to last as long. So strengthening the vine is going to overall allow the vine to be able to sustain these dangerous heat spikes almost on a yearly basis. That's the idea behind using a product that activates the soil microorganism. By doing so, we actually saw a difference of approximately 5 degrees cooler on the vines that we used the product on, because we did a trial now for 3 years, than on the vines when we didn't. So on top of that, the shade cloth will reduce the temperature another 5 to 10 degrees depending on what color. Right now we're using black because black absorbs heat and therefore reduces temperature even further. So that's the second prong of the protocol. The third prong of the protocol is, even though we dry farm, we don't do it for marketing reasons. We do it because our soils allow us to actually dry farm, because these calcareous clay soils have the ability to contain moisture from the rainy season and feed it to the vine to basically allow it to survive. But no different than we are in Europe. In Europe, many places in Europe are not allowed to irrigate, but if there's a severe heat wave, they're allowed actually by law to irrigate. And we don't obviously have a law that prevents us from irrigating, but we have done the same thing. Only the way we did it is very interesting. We put moisture probes in the ground, and what we realized is that at night the moisture gets replenished from the limestone subsoil. So the problem is only around 1 or 2 or in the afternoon between noon and say 4 o'clock, where it gets so dry that the heat dries up the root zone, and that's when the grapes can dehydrate. So of course, what did we do? Instead of giving it gallons and gallons of water, which we don't need, we did microbursts of watering, only between 12 and 4 mostly, okay, to give some moisture into the ground while the heat is demanding it. And by doing so, I'm talking maybe a quarter gallon of water, doing it every 2 days during the heat wave. That worked. So this three-pronged approach that I took in the vineyard saved us this year, and the grapes have never looked that good. I mean, there is zero damage from 2 extensively long heat waves that lasted 12 days each, and one of them reached all the way to 108 degrees, which I've never seen on this mountain. So much more severe than 17. So how is that translating the quality of the wine? I'm sure you're going to ask that next. It's actually incredible. I'm seeing some of the highest phenolics yet I've seen on this mountain. And the reason is very simple. We're mountain fruit, and our skin tends to be very thick. Okay? So when you have these episodes of long heat spikes, it actually does us a favor, because it melts the skin a little bit more because the grapes get hotter, and therefore allows for better release of phenolics. So you'll see it when we do a pump over next. The color is black. I mean, it just literally within 2-3 days after we put the wine in tank, the grapes in tank, the wine, the juice is already black. And then when we start fermenting, the phenolics levels that we're seeing are extremely high across the board, pretty much from every variety we worked with. So extremely happy about this vintage. It's turning out, even though 2020 has been a horrible year for most people in this world, so many challenges, so many trials, so many tribulations, so many losses. I'm hoping that this vintage is going to help us finish, with a thumbs up, that this year actually brought something really good to us.
So there's your three-prong approach: innovation, sustainability, because water
Correct.
issues in California, and extraordinary product, because I've seen the color on Instagram. I can't wait to see it in person. If you guys are not following Daou Vineyards on Instagram, you're missing out. Some of the best feeds in the wine world I've ever seen. Dynamic, gorgeous.
And be sure to follow me as well personally, because I post a lot of things as well. So Daniel.j.daou.
Did you hear that, guys? Daniel.j.daou, D-A-O-U.
Correct.
Awesome stuff.
Thank you.
I hear that your barrel program has got a lot more exciting this year as well.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yes. So, I wanted to create I want to say superior barrel, but really it was a superior barrel for us, for the mountain here. And why? Because our mountain here has arguably the highest phenolics I've ever measured in any bottle of Cabernet in the world. And I measured over 600 of them. So because of that, we restrict ourselves to using free run mostly, and we have no problem generating the tannins, the tannin extraction that we're looking for. Many winemakers like to use different kinds of oak because in many cases you don't have enough tannins. So you want the tannins to come from the oak to give it the structure it needs for basically aging very well and aging a long time. In our case, we drain really early to make sure we don't have even higher tannins. So the last thing we want is more tannins. So when you cure a barrel, right, in the elements, the longer you cure it, the softer the tannins are, the more flavorful it becomes. Most barrels are cured between 2 and 2.5 years on the market. I decided to create an experiment and cure a barrel for 5 years. So it's a very long time. So it actually takes 9 years for a bottle of Solomon or a bottle of patrimony to be made, because it's 5 years for the barrel, 1 year in the vineyard, 2 years for the wine aging in the barrels, and 1 year in the bottle. So it's a 9 year from beginning to end of the journey before the wine is out. And why did I do that? Because I wanted to make sure that the tannins were very soft. I didn't want tannins from the oak or very little, and I wanted to have more flavors. But I also found a very interesting strain of French oak that in France we call bois rosé, or pink wood in English. And I have my dear friends in France, the Canadel family, and Anna Jaillet as well. And Anna's married to Jacques Canadel, so they're one family. I remember visiting at their house, I'm going to say 10 years ago or so, and they took me in the back to see the tonnellerie, the cooperage, and they had just harvested a lot of trees, and I noticed a few of them were pink. And I said, it's very interesting. I've been to many tonnelleries before, but I've never seen pink trees. What are these? They say, well, they usually come from very old trees. They tend to have extra fine grain, which you want, because extra fine grain releases it's made for longer aging, so it releases all the flavors very, very slowly, so it integrates with the wine. Versus, a non-extra fine, like fine or coarse grain or just very fine, but not extra fine. So I said, what do you do with these trees? They say, it's just not that many, so we blend them with the rest. I said, I got a better idea. We do a trial. I want you to age them for me for 5 years. And then I want to create my own toast for it. The toast that I created is medium, extra long. So it's actually toasted at lower temperature, but for almost 2 hours. So a long time to get the toast that I want. We did trials after trials. It took us about 4 or 5 years, and now we have a program where, basically we get our, bois rosé barrels from France. But I took it a step further about 3 years ago. I decided to take some of these staves, and instead of curing them and aging them in Bordeaux or outside of Bordeaux where their tonnellerie is, I decided to cure them on our mountain here. So it'll be till next year before we make our first barrel from that mountain. And I'm very excited to see what's going to happen because, I want to have wines that have the purest expression of what grows on this fabulous mountain. And for me, we created our own yeast, so that is from here, that's native. Obviously the grapes are from here. All the wines from the estates are naturally made wines. We only use our native yeast and nutrition for the yeast to finish the fermentation. But I wanted to take a step further, and the step further is actually to age them in oak that actually was cured here. Not obviously harvested here because we don't have French oak here, but cured here. And we'll see what the results lead. If we like them, it'll be something we take to the next level and actually start curing more and more of our barrels here. But we'll be conducting this trial for the first time next year.
Talk about taking innovation to the nth degree, from soup to nuts. This is extraordinary. I can't wait to try the first wines from that barrel program.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the proverbial elephant in the room. We, of course, are recording the time of COVID.
Yep.
Which puts a whole different emphasis on the consumer, and as an immensely consumer-centric brand from day one, I think you have some very wise things to say about it to share with our audience.
Well, I mean, I think COVID definitely put a dent in a lot of people's abilities to buy bottles of wine. We have two kinds of wines. We have wines that we only sell at the winery and through our club membership. And we have wines that we sell predominantly, if not exclusively, in the wholesale market. Clearly, on the wholesale market, the on-premise part of the the online premise side of the business got affected quite a bit by COVID. People stopped going to restaurants. It's actually very sad to hear that. Just heard the statistic that 30% of all the restaurants will not come back in business. So. Very, very heartbreaking. I know so many people put their livelihood and their life into starting a restaurant, and to have something affect them so tragically is very sad. So obviously this side of the business for us got hurt quite a bit, just because people are not serving wine. They don't even have restaurants that are open. The good news is that off-premise made up for some of that, because a lot of people were, while they did not go to a restaurant to order a bottle of wine, they stayed home and cooked more, or they ordered food to go from many restaurants that provided them. And as a result of that, they often drank Daou wine. So we can't complain. Let's just say we're not obviously to the level where we would have liked to be this year with this COVID, but we're doing pretty well. And I'm very pleased with so far the consumer adoption and how the support that we've received out in the industry, out in the market, has been tremendous. Our members are very loyal. We haven't really seen a big drop into our members dropping out because of COVID. If anything, they're ordering more wine because they're spending more time at home and they're drinking more wine. Our tasting room did shut down for 2-3 months, and that did impact financially quite a bit what we did. However, as of I believe 3 months ago or so, the tasting room reopened only outside. So we have outside seating by reservation only. And we've been going. People come visit, and they're enjoying the same experience they would have experienced otherwise, COVID or not.
I just walked outside on your patio, and the guests were so animated. I mean, you wouldn't know that it's pandemic. Everybody's face just spelled happiness. So that was
actually,
really
I said the exact same thing this weekend. I went out to meet with somebody who was visiting. I walked around. I'm like, you'd never know we're in a pandemic. I mean, people are out there drinking wine, eating, and enjoying life. And people got to live. Yeah.
I think, yes, human nature.
Yeah. And obviously, we're taking a lot of precaution. I mean,
yes.
All of our staff wears masks at all times. Mm-hmm. Everybody in the winery is required to wear a mask. We have sanitization stations everywhere. So we keep the tables very far apart. If you're sitting on your table, you don't have to wear a mask. But if you get up to go anywhere, then you have to wear a mask. So we're following the guidelines given by the state, and so far they're working very well.
You have a vast portfolio of wines. There's been some new wines introduced recently, I understand. For those that are not familiar, can you walk us through it?
Yeah, so we introduced a wine called Bodyguard in the market. This is a tremendous wine, especially for the price. One of the things that my brother and I are very committed to is we call it approachable luxury. We're committed on making wines that way over-deliver on the price, regardless of the price point. I mean, we make wines that start at $15 and they go up to $1,000. But our mentality is always, regardless of the price point, we want the consumer to know that they're getting something that is normally worth a lot more. So Bodyguard is really the essence of that. I mean, this is a wine that is a naturally made wine, so only native yeast and nutrition, no playing around, no adding, color, no adding sugar, no adding all these things. It's a dry wine, very dry. It's on the extra dry spectrum of dryness. It's made out of 2 grapes, Petit Verdot, Petit Syrah, and it's probably phenolics-wise in the 0.1 percentile worldwide of all the wines I measured. So tremendous concentration, but yet so supple flavors and really rich flavors, and very affordable. It's a wine that sells in the 30s, depending on where you are in the country. And it's aged in 50% new French oak, and it's 100% free run. We don't even use press for that wine. So impossible to find that quality of wine for that price point anywhere in the world. And we're proud of it. So we put it out in the market, and it's really taken off. We introduced a rosé, as you know. This was our first introduction of a rosé wholesale. Now, growing up in south of France, I wanted to be true to tradition. I did not use saignée, did not cut down on quality or cut corners. This is a méthode provençale rosé made. It's a 95% Grenache Noir grapes and 5% Sauvignon Blanc. In France, it's often blended with either Sauvignon Blanc or Rôle, which is Vermentino. We call it Vermentino here. So we blended with Sauvignon Blanc, and the acceptance of this product in this market, I have to tell you, flabbergasted me. I mean, this is the first time we ever released this rosé in the market. It is now the 3rd best-selling rosé in California.
Amazing.
Incredible. I mean, the comments that we got out of it were incredible. People literally fell in love with this wine. And I'm proud of it because we did not cut corners. We stayed traditional to the core in terms of how we made this wine. And this is about a premium rosé from Provence-like. I mean, grown here on those beautiful soils that we have in Pastorobos with a beautiful Mediterranean-like climate. It was a huge success, so I can't complain.
I think I have a bit of a guess as to why people are falling in love with the wine. Rosé is obviously a hot category and also quite ubiquitous. Let's face it, there's a lot of bad rosé in the marketplace as a result of the popular demand. And I know everything you make is going to be top-notch quality, and people are craving that.
Well, thank you. I agree. I think people want quality, and they want, I don't think people mind. I think what this industry has shown us in the last, 10 years or so, maybe even more, is that the consumer doesn't mind paying a little more money, but they want to have something that is a huge value. And that's really at the heart of why Daou is successful. You get a bottle of Soul of a Lion, Ilona, sells for about $125 in the market, right? It drinks better, let's face it, and it gets better ratings than 90% of the wines out there that sell for 2 to 3 times the price.
That's right.
So consumers are looking at this saying, wow, why would I want to spend 3 times the price when I can get a great, highly rated, superb bottle of wine that is available every year, every day for that price? I mean, club members pay even less money for it. They pay about less than $100. This is a huge bottle of wine. I mean, for the price, you're getting tremendous value. So what the industry has shown us is that people don't mind spending more, but they want the value. And let me tell you where we learned that. In 2008, when the market crashed, a lot of those top wines that were selling for $40 or $50 in the market got discounted because nobody was buying anything with the huge, collapse of the economy in 2008. So they all went down to about $20. Well, all the consumers that were buying $10 and $15 bottle of wine, they saw these $20 bottle of wine thinking, wow, normally I can't afford them. They're selling for 40 or 50 bucks. I want to buy them. The problem is that they got used to this flavor. They got used to better bottle of wines that drink like a $50 bottle of wine. So when the economy went back, well, all the wines that had discounted went back to $50 or more bottle of wine. The consumer didn't want to spend that. They wanted a $20 bottle of wine that drank like a $50 bottle of wine. That's where Daou filled the niche. It was a 2010 vintage. We introduced our Discovery Cabernet Sauvignon. And it's been a real wild success. I mean, this wine is a wine that receives ratings from almost every critic in the 90 to 93 range on a yearly basis. It sells for anywhere between $18 to $22, depending on where you are in the country. And it's been a tremendous success for us. And that's because we filled that niche where the consumers still want to get a bottle of wine that drinks like a $50 bottle of wine, but they don't want to spend $50.
Well, it's fantastic that you recognize it and addressed it. Your wines are infinitely age-worthy. Your high-end ones probably would outlive me, I would think.
I'm pretty sure it would outlive all of us here.
But they're also delicious on release, which is, something that's really difficult to achieve, to basically fuse both value propositions.
And the question is, how do I do that, right?
Yeah.
That's a common question that I get asked all the time. So it's not an easy way to accomplish it, but it's taken me about 10 years of research to accomplish that. And today I can say confidently that I can release wines that are drinkable today, but they yet can probably age for 5 to 10 decades, maybe. And I explain to you how I do that. You see, what got me to figure out how to do that is actually making wine here. The first year I made wine in 2010 on the mountain, on Daou Mountain, I got trashed. I mean, I had never worked with grapes that had such high phenolics. So out of 26 acres I had planted, only 500 cases actually deemed to be worthy to be drinkable. So the rest I couldn't even use with my high-end wine. Clearly I wouldn't have survived making 500 cases out of 26 acres. So what I quickly realized is I needed to find a way to know, how to balance out the tannins. So now let's talk about that a little bit. So when the grapes arrive, right, and they get crushed and they go to a tank, right, at some point the process of fermentation, right, starts. At the process of fermentation, you basically have yeast that is consuming the sugar and turning it into alcohol, correct? Okay. Mm-hmm. As soon as that process of fermentation starts, what happens? Tannins start being generated. So most winemakers, what they do is they try to taste while the wine is fermenting, but the reality of it is it's impossible to taste while the wine is fermenting. And I'll tell you why. For one reason is you have carbonic acid into the wine, and we're going to taste it right now. When we do a pump over, I'm going to let you taste it. You'll see it's very hard to taste it because you got carbonic acid everywhere, which affects basically how the acidity shows. 2, you've got a gazillion grams of residual sugars. So it's like taking a wine and putting with it, a cup of sugar sugar and trying to decide if the wine tastes good or not. It's impossible. Okay? And 3, let's not forget, it's must. So it's going to be grippy. It's going to be, it could have some hydrogen sulfides to it, which could really impact the flavors or anything else. So what I did is I went out and I started measuring phenolics out of wines from all over the world, wines that I drink, wines that I made, and I ended up looking at the phenolics level and realizing where it is that I liked the wines best in terms of tannin extractions, but also in terms of mouthfeel. So when you measure phenolics, you can actually, there's a formula if you're using the Adams Harbison assay, where you take the tannin levels and you divide them by the IRPs, which are the overall phenols into the grapes. And the reason you do that is because the tannins are part of the IRP. So you're trying to see the percentage ratio of what is basically the tannin part of the overall phenolics. And what I notice is anytime you start growing much higher than 50%, the wine gets too grippy and it needs time because it was overly extracted. I also noticed that when you start reaching certain tannin levels, say over 1500, the wines start getting a little bit too grippy. If you get to 2000, the wine is almost undrinkable. You need to lay it down 10 years. Now I got to tell you, the first year I made wine here, I was having some levels of tannin almost at 3,000 parts of tannins. So it would have made the wine undrinkable. So now why did I do all that? Because then I created an algorithm, because clearly I cannot taste while I'm creating the wine and fermenting it. But I know what the end result needs to be, right? So what I do is I actually measure phenolics 2 to 3 times a day. And I have an algorithm that looks at all these, a bunch of conditions. There's probably over 7 or 8 conditions that I created a formula out of, that says if you basically have this many tannins, this many RPs, and a few other things, of course, most likely you need to drain right now. So by doing that, I know how to extract enough tannins to make the wines at bottling approachable upon release. But yet, make no mistake about it, they probably have some of the highest levels on earth for tannins for Cabernet Sauvignon. And I have the results, I can show them to you. So that the tannins is what hold the wines to allow it to age very well. See, a lot of people get mistaken about that. If you're dealing with white wine, which has no tannins, in 99% of the cases, right? I think there's a place in Italy that ferments Chardonnay, I think, on tannins. I've tasted it. Actually, it tastes a little very different. But white wines don't have tannins. Why? Because they don't get fermented on skin. So you extract the juice and then you ferment the juice alone, right? So, and Pinot Noir, overall tend to have much lower tannins. We're talking in the 0 to maybe 200, 250 parts per million of tannins versus Cabernet, which could be at 1,000 to 1,500. So, because of that, Pinot and white wine, especially white wine, the ageability factor is related directly to your acidity and your pH. So white wine that's very acidic, low pH, high acid, like a Riesling, is going to age 40, 50 years, right? I'm sure you've had these wines, because the acidity keeps it in check. For Pinot Noir, plays a similar role, not as much as white wine, but clearly, if you're at 3.6, 3.5 pH, for instance, when it comes to Pinot Noir, you're going to age a lot longer than a 3.8 probably. Why? Because there's only a little bit of tannins in the Pinot, there's not a lot. For Cabernet Sauvignon and for Bordeaux varieties, acidity and pH play almost no roles. I don't want to say none, but almost none. Why? Because it is the tannin structure that holds the wine together. Here's another good thing for you. How did Robert Parker become famous? I'll tell you how. It was in 1982. That's the vintage in Bordeaux that made him famous. How? Well, he tasted the wines. It was a California-like vintage. It was a warm vintage. The wines tasted more like a California wine. They had higher phenolics, right? They had ripe tannins. They had more color. And let's face it, they were more approachable upon release, right? Because they actually ripened on the vines. They didn't need to be ripened on the bottle, okay? So every critic made a mistake. It's a well-known thing. Every critic, when I tasted the wines from 1982, it said, soft wines, soft year, don't age, drink immediately. They were wrong. Why? Because they confused ripe tannins with amount of tannins. And the reality of it is, in warmer years, you have higher phenolics. So you actually have more tannins, but you have them ripe. Robert Parker, a new kid on the block, nobody knew him back then besides a small newsletter he had in the United States, tasted the wines and said, you guys are all wrong. Okay? These wines are going to age longer than all the others, because while the tannins are ripe, this has probably more tannins. He didn't even measure phenolics. He could tell with his palate. History tells us he was right. The 1982s are still drinking great today, and probably will drink good another 20 years. So when it comes to Cabernet, tannin extraction is extremely important. You don't want to overdo it, but you don't want to underdo it. So it's like a bell curve, and you have to find your sweet spot. And for me, that's what my algorithm does. It allows me to find my sweet spot during the fermentation as to make sure that I don't under extract so that the wine doesn't age a long time, or over extract where the wine will be too grippy and not enjoyable for years before it's after it's bottled.
You've isolated an extraordinarily powerful dynamic. Is there papers about it? Are you getting calls daily from Bordeaux First Growth Chateaus?
I have some friends in Bordeaux that ask me about it, but you remember that there is no textbook that tells you what is right. This is purely based on my palate. And I've had a few conversations with people and they go, so you're making wine by numbers? I said, no, I'm not making wine by numbers. I'm making wine based on my palate. However, I cannot taste while the wine is fermenting. So I have to rely on something. And I found the closest thing to my palate, which is where my palate should be. And I'm actually able to measure it. So I know where my palate's gonna be when the wine is done.
Well, your palate essentially aligns with a lot of consumers. There's a lot of fans of the brand that are so grateful that they're able to drink so well, early and often.
Yes, and that is something that's been our signature, literally from day one. All these wines are approachable today, but let me tell you, make no mistake about it, 7 to 10 years later, oh my gosh, these wines evolve into something so beautiful. You know, Fred Dame, who's on our team, said something very interesting when he first joined us. And I'd forgotten what he said. I'll tell you the story. He said, Daniel, your wines are very interesting. He goes, the first 5 to 7 years, you taste the baby fat. He goes, but after that, it's like a different wine. It's mineral, you taste the earth, because, you know, we have the same soils as Europe, pretty much.
Sure.
Well, I'd forgotten about that, and last year I was at the Belmont Hotel in Santa Barbara, and they have every vintage of Soul of a Lion and Patrimony. And so I ordered a bottle of 2013 Soul of a Lion. And I didn't watch the sommelier pour it. He just poured a glass. I think it may have been in the bathroom. I came back. I started drinking the wine, and I thought to myself, this is not my wine. I'm like, it doesn't taste like anything I remember from 2013. That's Soul of a Lion. So I asked the sommelier to show me the bottle, and it was indeed our bottle. And then I remember what Fred had said. The wine was about 7 years old or 6 years old, and the wine was so transformed. I felt like I was drinking an old world wine that had minerality and earthiness just come out of everywhere. And the wine was so complex, and I loved that. I mean, those are the nuances I look for in a bottle of Cabernet after it ages. So it'll be exciting to see these wines age, 2, 3, 4 decades. I probably won't be here in many decades, but my kids maybe will taste them. Who knows, But I think they will definitely be very, very long age-worthy.
How exciting it is to make a multi-generational wine like that. In that same vein, what are you working on? Are there new things in the works that we should be keeping an eye on?
Yes, we're very excited to start building the Patrimony Winery. Patrimony, as you know, has been a brand that I created with my brother about now in 2013. And the reviews have been just amazing. There's a 3-year waiting list to get this wine. The wine has just been incredibly well received. We just had Eric Johnson join our team as director for Patrimony. Eric was the head sommelier at French Laundry for many years. Big believer in the wine. The wine is making a lot of waves right now. One of the Patrimony wines called Cave de Lyon, which is a blend of Cabernet and Cabernet Franc. Got a huge review by Wine Advocate. European distributors contacted us and they asked us if they could get an allocation. We gave them one. They sold it all in like one email, and we're talking across Europe. Very surprising to see that. We sent them a sample of the barrel. So I think a third of the production's already gone, and we didn't even offer it. I mean, it was just like, we'll give you an allocation. So the wine has been extremely well received, and this is my next this is really our legacy, my brother and I's legacy. Actually, matter of fact, if you look at the new bottle, you'll see in Latin, and it's inscribed Legatum Nostrum, which is our legacy. This is the label for Cave de Lyon. So this is our family crest. So
absolutely stunning.
We're excited about this project. So hopefully we can break ground next year to start building the winery. We purchased 260 acres adjacent to Down Mountain, so it's part of Down Mountain now, which will be dedicated for Patrimony. And obviously Patrimony gets to pull from the best blocks on Down Mountain because it is one mountain. So very exciting project is something that I hope that my children will join me as well. My daughter is finishing her master's in Bordeaux. and she will be coming back next year to hopefully work with Patrimony with me and some of the other wines. And my son is finishing his degree in the next couple of years, and hopefully he'll join in as well, so we can all make wine together.
Wow, so in the family, it's so important for family business.
Yes,
to have the next generation join.
Correct. We're family owned, obviously, and operated, but we're multi-generational as well.
Wow, so much intense, beautiful intel that we just gleaned. So last but not least, I know people that are listening are really excited about maybe partaking in your library selections as well as current releases. Do you have something to offer?
So unfortunately, we're very limited for the 13th, 14th, and 15th vintage of Patrimony, because the production is so small and we didn't keep enough, unfortunately. So those, unfortunately, are not available. But Soul of a Line, we could probably make some library available back to 2012. So we do have some of those.
Exciting.
And then Patrimony, we definitely have the 16 that we can make available as well.
I just think, given what we discussed as far as the age-worthy factor, I know people are probably salivating over the opportunity to put a little away and then follow the trajectory.
I agree. I think the best way to really taste these wines is to actually go back 7 to 10 years and actually taste them, and you would be shocked about the quality. I've done so much when it comes to wine, the winemaking part, that you won't realize it until the wine is aged a long time. So, for instance, color. All color is not equal. Right? Color is, the term for it is anthocyanin. That's what comes from the red pigmentation of the skin. Well, unless you know what you're doing in the cellar and you understand phenolics readings, and a few tricks up my sleeve that I'm not going to discuss here, what will happen is you will have a lot of color at bottling, but it will precipitate within a year or two by 50%. Wow. If you buy a bottle of our wine, if you drink a bottle of our wine that's even 10 years old, color hasn't changed. That's the technique that I've come up with that really allows to bind a anthocyanin molecule to a tannin molecule, therefore making it stable. And there are so many different trials that I've done on a yearly basis over the last 10 years. And I've got a few tricks that really bind this accelerate this mechanism so well that there is so much stable color in each wine that it will not precipitate even with 10 years of age.
Wow. There you heard it, you guys, from the man himself. Every time I'm around him, I feel smarter. I know you will too. And there's much more to come. I hope to sit down with him again and fill you guys in on everything you should know and care about in the wine world.
Thank you, Ilona.
Thank you.
Thanks again for tuning in to the official podcast of Palate Exposure featuring Ilona Thompson. We'll see you again next week.